prove that there is more than one way to be a man, not just the rigid ideas of manhood that we were given by our parents and they got from their parents.
Brandon, welcome to Ultrahabits. Good morning from your alma mater, Australia.
Yeah, mate. Good morning, good afternoon from Chattanooga, Tennessee. Great to be here.
Oh, it's funny how we always joke about a Australian that grew up in America now living in Australia, and an Australian that grew up in Australia but has an American dad now living in America.
I know, traded places.
Yeah. I wonder if we were to look at kind of how we've adopted the other culture and have a conversation about that, like, kind
That's
of where we both landed in that whole integration piece.
Interesting. Yes. Yeah, let's do that, because I've never even thought to connect on this level with someone, born in America, living in Australia, identifying, perhaps those cultural differences or what's just
What
happening. So let's
what
do it.
what do you find to be the biggest difference being in Australia? I'm sorry, in the US as an Australian.
It's challenging to answer that, because you probably know this to be true in the States. America could be sectioned up into multiple different countries. It really is, like, there is a lot of difference, say, where I live in the Southeast as opposed to the Northwest or the Northeast. But if I could broad stroke the difference, one thing I do not remember, and it could have been my age, or it could have been the people I was surrounding myself with. But when I was living in Australia, I was 25 when I moved, 26. I never, ever spoke about politics. Couldn't have cared less of what was happening in politics in Australia. And then here, it's almost like, hi, Bill, 33, accountant, Republican. Like, what? Like, there's just so much associated, and I'm broad stroking here because not everyone is that way. And I firmly believe that majority of people out there, regardless of their political beliefs, don't want to be having these conversations as well. But there seems to be such a binary established on how one voted in the last election of, that's going to inform my feelings and thoughts about you. So I have reserved myself to be politically homeless, and that keeps me out of many conversations that I just don't care to have. So that's been what I've witnessed. I'm curious of your thoughts, and then I want to hear what differences you see.
Well, the interesting thing is I too left when I was 26 to come to Australia. And at that age, I wouldn't have been involved in, paying taxes, concerned with kind of political agendas. I was from California, which is it's unique in itself, where it's extremely diverse, very liberal, obviously. And I think when you're growing up in California, you don't necessarily have a view of what's happening across the country, because what's happening in California is not necessarily representative of what's happening down south. But I would say that in Australia, there is less diversity in opinion, right? Like, it's a diverse country, but in terms of the polarized views, you don't really have that. So people aren't as intense around the political dialogue because of that. But also, Australians by nature have a bit of contempt towards anything leadership. And you would never find Australians really, other than bagging and slagging the politician, even if they're good, and it's not necessarily done in a in a mean way, but like, Australians just don't really have, I think, the willingness to dive into deep political conversations. And I don't think that Australians, and I think this is partly why Australians, as compliant as Aussies are, they'll whinge and moan about decisions made, but they'll be compliant. I think Australians will never give in to evangelic leaders, because Australians Australians don't really like to be pontificated to. They kind of are cynical, and in many ways, they're like, "Come on, dude!" Like, so I think in that way, there's no Messiah complex here, which I think the United States is very prone to. That guy or that woman's the answer.
There's definitely this. Yeah, I love how you said the Messiah complex. Like, there's definitely a cult of personality that is created. I mean, just look at the former president. There was definitely, like, especially being here in the Southeast, I witnessed it a lot. People that otherwise would tell you disgusting behavior, disgusting language, shouldn't talk that way, a narcissist, whatever. They would have been at January 6th storming the Capitol if they had a choice, if they had the ability to be there. So it was quite intriguing to witness people be so, I don't know the words, but yeah, to be so polarized in a sense of, this person, because some bloke said that Trump was coming back to save the world, and it is written in scripture and whatever. And I was like, oh God, if that doesn't give you a Messiah complex, I don't know what does. So I found all that very intriguing to witness. I definitely came out of the 2020 elections with a hangover, that's for sure, because I wanted to at least know where my vote was going. And yeah, so that was an interesting thing for me to witness, of how many people buy in so heavily to what's happening politically. Whereas my experience in Australia is the pub still serving chicken palmies and a pint for $5 between 4 and 6 p.m. and is the surf good? Like, that's all I really cared about. So
yeah, it's. I think that particularly globally, it's happening, but in the U.S., I think people forget that in the on the macro level, Republicans and Democrats and individuals actually have a lot more in common.
yes,
And unfortunately, their political views, I mean, they're still both liberal in the sense they both believe in democracy and the freedom of choice. What's been lost is the ability to debate.
yeah,
And people are becoming tribal about their political views. And if you put it on kind of, if you look at it on a macro level, like Republicans and Democrats, as individual humans, but even as a political party, have far more in common than um, than than they don't.
yeah.
And I guess what I'm saying is somehow we've forgotten that. Yeah, let's shift the conversation. But I think
Let,
it
let,
was
let, let me say one final
yeah,
thing just quickly, RJ, if you don't mind.
yeah, of
So
course.
I host a men's circle at my house every Tuesday night, and it's a non-denominational men's circle: gay, straight, black, white, atheist, Jewish, people, all men of difference. If you want to be a better man, if you want to be held to a higher standard, if you want that accountability, if you want a place to take off the mask, that's what we're there for. And you couldn't find a more diverse group politically. Yet I can't tell you who voted for who in the last election, because we don't care. We don't. That's not what we're there to connect over. And what I argue that what we connect over is what people want more than anything, right? Is that feeling of connectedness, that feeling of being safe with a group of people. And tribalism, in my opinion, it's so easy to romanticize tribalism today. I need to find my tribe. Like, you join a CrossFit gym and it's a tribe. When I owned my gym in Australia, we were the Zone tribe. But when you really look at tribal days, it was not pretty. It was us versus them. It was our survival at all costs, your demise at all costs. And not a lot of coexistence. And if it did occur, it was purely transactional. And if we want to live that way today, then we will continue. What comes naturally is us versus them. We establish a binary. We're right, you're wrong. I can other you because I disagree with you about abortion, because I disagree with you about the border, because I disagree with you about these other things. I can then other you. And when I have othered you enough, and when I consider your feelings, your beliefs to be evil, then I can justify in my own mind doing inhumane things. to you, which is what I believe we're seeing. Like the gay clubs in Orlando getting shot up, by extreme right wingers. Just case in point. And there's sadly in America a million examples of what that hate looks like when it's created, when it's kindled in the wrong place. And so my concern is that when there aren't leaders in this country prepared to be responsible with this gap that's created, this division that's created between parties or belief systems, or if there isn't someone responsible willing to step up to help heal that divide, irresponsible people are going to fill in that space and fill in that void. And I think that's what we're seeing right now here in the States. I can't comment on the degree in which it's happening in Australia, if it is at all happening, but we're seeing this in Sri Lanka, we're seeing this in Brazil, we're seeing this in Myanmar, we're seeing this all over the world right now. So my hope is examples like our men's circle is that we can identify, like you said, our Venn diagram crosses more than it doesn't. So how can we find the things we relate on as opposed to the fringe things on the outside of that doesn't cross over, that we disagree on, and use what we relate on to be the fertile soil in which how we can connect?
There's a lot in that, Brandon. I think, we have an issue of leaders deciding to politicize and add fuel to the fire when it comes to issues that are hot topics. That's part of the problem, right? And to me, doing that intentionally is, and this is going to be strong, but I think that's evil. I actually think that is super, super bad, because a smart individual is making a choice to win at the expense of the detriment of a society, and which, the untold violence, all the stuff that comes with that. There is blood on people's hands, and I'm not being dramatic in my view. Like, I feel that when you do that, when you mislead through propaganda and you use an issue as a leverage point, like that's a pretty act of evil. And what blows my mind is, and I was talking to an American about this, with all the talent in the United States of America, where are the stoic men or women that are making a decision to get into leadership and operate from a place of ethics first? Like I would imagine that there is no shortage, and I know there isn't because I grew up there, of individual, like, where are the people that we see in all other forms of business and military and other forms in the United States where there's, ethical leadership occurring? Why is none of that coming into the political arena? The question may be, once it does, or if an individual like that does come into the political arena, maybe the political forum in the United States just doesn't allow it to flourish.
Yeah, I believe there's a lot of truth to what you're saying. I'm sure there is an answer. I don't have it. One thing I would say is to be ethical, to have morality, to be stoic and unswayed by the direction of any political party that you choose to align yourself with. That is a formula to be very unsuccessful as a politician. You're not playing the game. And unfortunately, I feel like it's a fishing line that's so tangled. I don't know how we can go about untangling it. So yeah, I don't have any answers. But what you were saying is they're remarkable people. There's no shortage of people having incredible ripples on a smaller level and having greater impact that way. You look at organizations like Movember, they've done more for men's mental health than I believe any legislation ever has, right, in Australia and here in the US. So I think it comes down to the greater massive of our population here that is hoping to leave this earth and people that they meet better than when they found them, it's going to depend on that, as opposed to any individual who can lead us out of these choppy waters. So, mate, I'm not too sure. Hence my kind of political homelessness. We try and keep our sovereignty in our own kingdom of this household, and it's good to stay up to date with what's happening in the world, but we try not to get too bogged down with what's happening kind of politically in that sense. And someone might say that's naive because you need to know what's going on to know your place and know the future. And I've got a neighbor just down the road here who will be like, well, before you know it, the government's going to have their hands so far up your ass and they're going to be able to do anything they want with you and blah, blah, blah. And you need to protect yourself with guns and da-da-da. And I'm like, nah, that doesn't necessarily sit with our philosophy in a sense. And guns is a different one. I'm still not used to guns. I like shooting them. It's a lot of fun, but I still don't know where I stand on having them in my household. So yeah, America is a trip. It's a real trip right now. I feel like there's a lot happening right now. Part of it makes me miss home, and part of it makes me excited to be in a country where there's a lot of change happening on a grand stage. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey.
I've got friends in Tennessee. Now, one is from Australia. They're a couple. She's from Brisbane, lived in Sydney, and he's Canadian but lived in Australia. That's where I met him, and he met her, and he's down south. And we have good conversations, because when I met him, he was kind of really left, Canadian, and he had big ideas about working for an NGO, and now he's corporate. We make jokes about it, like he's got kids, he's got to make the money, right? So I do the sellout jokes, but anyway, so let's talk about yourself, Brandon, in terms of where you're at. So you have a 9-week-old, yeah?
9-week-old, yes, I do.
Yeah. What has been the biggest shift or realization pre 9 weeks to post 9 weeks for you?
Before I answer that, physically, can you see it under my eyes right now?
Brandon, you're still one of the prettiest blokes I know.
Oh, shucks. You say that. You say that to all,
all the boys.
All your guests. So yeah, she gave us a rough night last night. But man, shift. I was having this conversation. I worked out with a buddy of mine this morning, and I brought Bindi with me. It's my daughter. Brought her with me and did the workout, and we did some Wim Hof, did some breath work at the end, which was really cool. And during that breath work, I had this really emotional experience of just seeing her face and the immense rush of all these different emotions, the joy of new life and new beginnings, and having this joyful little creature in my life, the sadness that comes with and the fear that comes with what ifs, what if anything was to happen to her, the anger that comes with the things I can't do now because I'm responsible for this child, that little bit of resentment that's come up, the shame of am I doing enough? Am I doing the right things? Those kind of what if questions. And I came out of it and shared that with him. He sits in my men's circle too. And I kind of pulled her out of her car seat and was just looking at her. And I said, mate, there was no moment where I always envisioned that when I was going to become a father, I'd feel like an adult. And I don't. I feel like me. I feel like me as I ever have been me in a way. I guess what's different was when Christine was pregnant and we're going through the motions, so much work goes into preparing for a baby. My goodness, the OB appointments, and Christine's high risk. So every week I'm in there with her and we're looking at the scan of our little blueberry turned, kiwi turned papaya, and that emotional journey. And we had an ectopic pregnancy prior to that. So we had a miscarriage prior. So there was that emotions kind of thrown in. So I feel like the whole preparation of the pregnancy, the impact that was having on me was that things are changing. The status quo is being shook inside of me. But there was always that question of like, am I going to be able to handle fatherhood? I've always had this idea that I wanted like a million kids, always wanted to be a dad since I was 4. There was no, I want to be a policeman, I want to be an astronaut. It's like, I want to be a dad. I just knew that. But as it came closer, I was like, man, what relationship am I going to have with this human? We didn't know if it was going to be a boy or girl. We waited. And I found it so surreal that when Bindi was born and she was up on Christine's chest and we find out it's a girl and there's crying and tears, there was no moment of, this is my child, I will protect you for the rest of your days, I am here to serve you. It was, that's a baby, not that's my baby.
Yeah.
It was real surreal, real like dissonance going on here.
Yeah.
But every moment, every day, every milestone, it's like it's slowly integrated into my life. And I don't know if it comes when I'm dropping her off at kindergarten for the first time, or she starts calling me daddy, or there's still a part of me that goes, like, when you turn a new age, like I turned 30 just a couple weeks ago. People ask me my age, I still say 29. Yeah. Like it's like that. It's not like, hey Brandon, what do you do? Or tell me about you. Dad isn't the first thing that comes up yet. So it's weird, man, because I always envisioned it was going to be this spiritual experience, but really it's this like slow osmosis that's occurring. And the cool thing about that is there's no downward dip, because there was no peak. It's only been a gradual climb, which brings more enjoyment, more love, more laughter, more happiness. Some of that love and happiness disappears at 3 a.m. when I want to walk into the creek with her. But yeah, it's so, there's so many things happening in our lives. New house, we just got married, but we have our ceremony coming up, like big 200 people ceremony. Like we have all this stuff happening at once. So this Wim Hof breath work this morning was kind of cool to really feel my heart and my soul give me that signal of, that's your daughter, you're a dad. So
I think, and I do agree with you on that whole process of becoming a dad. And I was talking to my wife about this, I think after our first or second, I don't remember. And she had made this really good point, that is, women, they have developed a relationship with this baby for 9 months. And for us, it hasn't been real. And, and then all of a sudden this baby pops out. I very much, to your point, felt the same way as well. And I have to be honest with you, like, I've learned to love my children because it's another relationship. Like, I don't know, maybe it's a father thing. Maybe some fathers have it. Maybe it's a human thing. But for me, I've found that it's through time and investment and, those moments together, like any other relationship, that you learn to love, right? There was an interesting study done where it was a study on meaning, and I don't know the actual detail of it, but I'll give you the gist. They had interviewed a bunch of new parents, and what they found was every parent was like, this is fucking hard. Like, this is ridiculously hard. But it gave them meaning. And the end result of this study was, what gives us meaning is hard. It's not necessarily fun. Because I would say rearing a child yeah, there's moments that are fun, but it's not fun. Like, dude, it's not fun. The process is hard.
I mean, I'm only 9 weeks in, and I have definitely loathed certain moments for sure.
Yeah, yeah, it's you have those moments where we're together and you get to smile, but it is a crucible. And I mean, particularly for you, bro, like you're now going through the whole process of marriage, ceremony, baby, new place. Like, are you feeling have you had moments where you're just feeling separated and not together because of this change? Like, how have you coped with just the multiple moving parts?
Yeah, no, definitely have felt that separation. Like case in point, we move into this house. We go from 1,500 square feet, so 500 square meters, to 4,500 square feet, whatever that is in meters. So we've tripled our size, and with that came a master shower that had black mold, a 2-story deck that's pulling away from the house, you know, water that's coming in through the walls because we're below grade. All these things, right? All these things happening at once. And not only that, we bought this and sold our last house in Christine's 3rd trimester. So this was typical millennials. Let's just do it all at once. Let's eat the elephant. And so, yes, there's been plenty of time for what I would call distraction from actually witnessing and feeling the moment. In fact, I'm only kind of coming to this awareness now that breath work I did this morning where I felt those feelings for Bindi, that's the first time I've really kind of felt that since she was born, which tells me that I've been, this is probably telling me that I've been living a lot in my head because I got contractors coming in and out of the house. My wife's back at work. I'm teaching at nights. So I'm trying to prepare. It took me 3 hours to prep dinner the other night, RJ. 3 hours. Because you shouldn't wield a knife with a baby. And she was going through her 6 to 8 week little whingy, sooky time where she wanted to be held 24/7. And so there hasn't been those moments of really connecting to source, my inner self, which has definitely made me feel separated probably from my wife, from people around me. Survival. It's definitely been survival.
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there's no shortage of people around me going, it's okay. You just had a baby.
Mate, I would argue that this is, I think particularly for people that are growth orientated and looking at building a life, this for you is one of those rubber meets the road moments where it's going to take not only everything you've learned to date, but more to ultimately move through this. And I would argue that your friends are right. Like, there is a reason you're on autopilot because you've got to get shit done. And to kind of sit there and try to soak in and be in the moment, unless you're Zen like, and most Zen masters don't have kids in households to run, they're sitting on a mountain, right? Like that's all well and good when you're not being screamed at by a baby and trying to cook dinner and run a business and fix a house that's falling apart.
Preach.
No,
Yeah. Not to mention the dad bod's kind of real, like the dad bod's real. So I've got a 25K in like 2 weeks, and just to kind of get the gears moving again and trying to get started meal prepping today and just getting those kind of, I was trying to think, there's definitely been a kind of a malaise in my life the past couple of years, partly because I found the love of my life and I found the place I want to grow a family, and I'm growing a career, and I kind of put the self-development microscope away to just do the work, kind of quit reading the books, quit listening to the podcast, just do the work. So I've been in that kind of warrior archetype of just doing the work. Not super in my feeler unless I have to, because it is a skill that I have built through many years of men's work and sitting in circles. But yeah, and now I'm starting to find like, okay, now that there is the unavoidable responsibility of a child. I mean, you can kind of drop the ball with a dog, right? You know, I haven't really walked the dog in a couple days or weeks, or, you know, I haven't really kept up with their flea and tick. Like you can you can do that, and there's no real catastrophic result. I can't do that with my daughter. I can't do that in my marriage, but I can do that to myself. And so now that the calendar's getting far more colorful, and now that I'm getting far less time, I'm reminded of when I, used to own my gym on the Gold Coast. It was 4 a.m. wake up. It was 9 p.m. bedtime. It was regimented. I meal prepped on Sundays. Like I gave 4 hours to meal prep. Like that stuff is coming in as kind of like it's necessity to just keep forward motion. I knew we'd get to the Ultrahabits part of this conversation at some point.
Yeah, I mean, you and I've talked about it though, the paradigm of not owning your time anymore. You will have to optimize. When I had my first child, I lost meditation, and I lost it for 5 years. Because what happened was I developed a habit of not doing it. When I tried to do it, it was just chaos in the house. I was too tired. And I started to run and felt like I needed to move my body first thing in the morning was more important than a formal meditation. I'm probably now at a point where over the last few months, particularly over the last month or so, I've ramped up my meditation. I go in a separate room. I've got a bit of a routine down with it, but it's, and a friend said this to me when I used to be deep in meditation, and he was fucking always tired because he had little kids. And I look at him, he just looked wrecked. He meditated too, and he was like, "Bro, when you have kids, all that shit." Like what he was trying to say is like, you're still gonna have to be solid, and you're still gonna have your routine and your regiment. But a lot of those activities that were about quiet time, and they're and then and the part of the reason I dropped the meditation was because I tried to do it and it would get disrupted, and then I'd beat myself up for it,
Yeah.
and it wasn't serving me right.
Or the thing that disrupted you. Did you ever go there?
Well, it'd be screaming kids. Like it was
Yeah.
just a lack of ability to. Yeah.
I mean, I was cutting chicken today. Go to Costco. Love my Costco membership. Buy like 5 kilos of chicken, and I'm, cutting it and marinating it and doing all the rest. And then midway through, Bindi should be asleep for at least like 2 hours. Like I'm getting her schedule pretty down, and she sleeps for 20 minutes, and then boom, screams. And I'm like, I am leaving chicken on the counter right now. I hate the fact that I'm leaving all this chicken just sitting there. And I wasn't thinking, oh, rats. Now this. Well, we'll work it. No, I'm thinking that little how inconsiderate of that 9-week-old that doesn't even have access to a prefrontal cortex. How dare you?
Yeah.
I'm curious, was there a part of you, like, so you said like 5 years no meditation, and credit to running. I can only speak for me. Running is very meditative in its own way, but not necessarily sitting on a cube or a cushion and doing breaths. Was there a part of you when people were saying, as you're coming into fatherhood, like, hey man, forget meditation, forget this, forget that? Was there a part of you that ever went, I asked this because I did this. Nah, not me though. No, I'll be able to meditate. I'll be able to get it in. I'll be able to.
Yeah, look, I think ultimately, if I really had wanted to, I would have. What I found when I'm traveling well, okay, the interesting thing for me, my relationship to meditation. So I let it go. I started running more. It was meditative in nature, but I still wasn't uh, sitting down in a process, which I think one should do for meditation. Like, I think the whole act of moving, running, meditations and stuff, you're still missing the component of focus and being and sitting with self. When you're moving, you have the ability to kind of be distracted in a sense, right? And the reason I was okay for many of those years is I was okay being manic to a degree. I didn't have an issue, or I didn't feel chaotic, if that makes sense. Like, I was kind of just doing life. I had the kids through those years. I was running, I was exercising. I didn't feel the dis-ease from not meditating. What's happened recently, and you and I had this conversation on your show, was I think I hit another plateau where I started to go into my thoughts more in a negative way. And the moving and the constant moving wasn't I wasn't shifting, when I say the constant moving through things like running. And so I think I needed to come back to the mat. And I might have been able to find that. Yeah, I mean, generally, you and I are people that we're going to do what we really want to do, right? So even with the screaming kids and the crazy schedule, yeah, I mean, there was part of me that thought, you know what, I'm still going to hold on to this and do it. When my mate particularly told me, and this was before I had kids, but then I just realized that my meditations weren't, with the kids, I was either tired or the quality of it. And when I did have time to do it, I was so wrecked. I just let it go because it wasn't serving me.
Sure.
So now that you're in this space, you've realized that you kind of, particularly from the session you've had today with the breathing work or the breath work, you've got some realizations. What do you want to do to move forward? Like, how and I know it's fresh, let's say the session you had today and the realizations and what's come up for you, like, what do you think the way forward is for you?
Small anecdote to answer that. It will require accountability. So I'm not I firmly believe that willpower and motivation is an exhaustible resource. It's exhaustible.
Yeah.
And I believe anyone that has that kind of David Goggins-esque kind of nature about them, they're fronting. I think everyone has a point where they just, like yourself, I've only ever known you to be a supreme achiever, and you're taking this season of life right now to just slow things down, recover, sharpen the axe, which is what our conversation was like on my show. In order for me to perform at a high level, I don't have that that well that I can tap into. Not unless something really pisses me off. But when I have accountability around me, when I have that friend who is willing to get up at 6 a.m. while it's raining and 7 degrees outside, I know they're going to be at the trailhead to go run. And it's up to me of whether I'm going to keep my agreement and be there. My buddy Neil, who I worked out with this morning, he will never say no to things like that. Hey, at my 30th in December, it was like 40 degrees Fahrenheit. What's that in Celsius?
Freezing, pretty much,
cold,
isn't it?
Cold.
Yeah, it's cold.
Yeah. So I'm like, I'm turning 30. Do you want to go jump in the Tennessee River? And he was like, didn't even. Yeah, I could have a million times talked myself in and out of that. And he just goes, yep, sure. So moving forward, I shared that aha and awakening with him. And I think moving forward, when I have people like that can witness those moments for me, they can help anchor me to those moments. I don't want to put that pressure on my wife. I want to share it with her, but I don't want to put that's not her job, right? It's my job. But I have friends and men whom I care deeply about, and they care about me, that they will help me continue my journey towards that and making that a common practice. He and I, as I mentioned previously, he sits in my men's circle, and he and I mentioned that they were getting a little bit repetitive. What can we do to start shaking it up? And, let's go on a hike. Let's go on a hike that Tuesday. Let's do some breath work the next Tuesday. Let's do a sauna the next Tuesday. Let's, have a meal the following Tuesday, like to keep it fresh. But there is intention. There is an opportunity to do some breath work. There is a chance to kind of tap in to that heart stuff and get out of the head. So in your pre-interview checklist, it's like, hey, get to the point. I've totally broken the rules today.
No, you haven't. No. Actually, Tove created that checklist, and
Nice.
it was more around free flowing dialogue, and you've been on point, and you're always on point. So one of the things that worked for me was being very clear on the vision of how I wanted my child to see me. Right. So like I wanted my child, from the moment they could remember, to see me fit, to experience me in a way that was optimized. So I think that can be a very strong why to ensuring that you're maintaining and continuing to evolve. It's now, for your child to see and witness your sermons being unfolded to them through your actions.
Yeah.
All right. And there's, so I would argue it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be pretty. You and I had these conversations. I remember, but particularly on the physicality front, I had a mat. Burpees became my best friend during during my child's youngest weeks and years. 20 minutes of burpees, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like, like you don't have to make it an event. But I would argue that particularly, one could say, well, get sleep is a parent, but that may not always be an option. Sometimes you just got to push those endorphins to keep going. So that might mean a quick workout. I think the self-care piece is huge. I find, with the culmination of chaos through parenting and what you're going through, you really find the edges of your capability. You would really be experiencing the edges of your capability right now, no doubt, in terms of emotional bandwidth, psychological bandwidth. But this is a growing point for you, Brandon. Like this is where you're going to stretch exponentially. And you're right. Like you're at a place where you're not going to be, you may not have the time to read or consume the material, but it's implementation. You know what you need to do, dude.
Yeah. These words will no doubt at many points bite me in the butt, but there are times, so I have this narrative I've always had this narrative of you could be doing more. Going to bed at night, you could be doing more, is a very common thought process. So when parenting is easy, there's a part of me that goes, oh, but it's because you're not putting in as much effort. When there is possibly this other part of me that intuitively is just kicking ass. And like, I got this. Like, I am the swaddle king. I can swaddle a baby like the tightest little burrito. I know
I couldn't.
I can put a baby to sleep so quickly. Like all these little things, and I'm like, yeah. But then there's a part of me that's like, no, it's feeling easy because you're not doing enough.
Yeah.
And it takes me to some words of mentor. When we got pregnant the second time with Bindi, I called a mentor of mine just to kind of process the reality of what was happening. Like we made it to 12 weeks. Okay, we are kind of in a safer zone. And I was asking him about parenthood and me and my parenting and what it's going to look like. And And I started saying words like, I want to be here for, it was it at the time. I want to be here for it. I want to, be this person for it. I want to look a certain way, be a certain way. And he goes, well, what if your child was here for you? What if your child's sole purpose was to actually be here for you as a parent? And I went, whoa, that's not a common narrative. It's always, it's not about you anymore. It's about the kid. And he was saying, well, what if it was the other way around? Not that it will be, not that it has to be. But that was an interesting reframe to look at the relationship and go, man, I am going to get so good at achieving so much with so little in the gas tank. That's a great callus to build on my hands as I personally believe that my best professional years are probably going to happen in my late 30s and 40s. Like, honestly, I'm not reserving that time for now. I'm reserving that time for later. Whether it happens or not, I don't know. But maybe the grit and the dirt under my nails comes from this crucible, as you said, of having a newborn. And we don't plan on stopping. Like, we plan on having a couple. So that, this kind of training ground is perfect for me at this stage of life, because I really do feel like I'm snipping boyhood in a big way into manhood through this journey. It doesn't feel like an instant strike of lightning. It feels like it's just, with home ownership and marriage, it feels like these just steps towards it. And what's evidence of that is now how much joy I get when I'm not changing the next diaper. How much joy I get when Bindy's asleep. How much joy I get when I squeeze in those 10 minutes of burpees.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, what I took for granted before.
That's exactly right.
Smells smell better. Colors are more colorful. The feels are more feeling. So it feels like I was made for this. And it also feels like I don't have a fucking clue what I'm doing some of the time too. So it's perfect. It's been the greatest thing ever. And I'm always trying to cross the river too early at the next milestone or the next thing that's going to happen, or what am I going to do if Bindi has friends whose parents I hate? Like, these random questions, like thoughts go into my head of like,
we talk about that.
Yeah. What do I do when that happens? But goes to show that's how, my modus operandi right now is the head kind of running the survival game, whereas my heart and my intuition probably has enough to steer the ship.
Definitely. I mean, you got to remember that we're biologically programmed for this. This is why we're here, really, not to wear clothes and have podcasts and drink lattes, right? Like, and I think your mentor's comment.
We can podcast without clothing on, RJ.
Yeah.
Next one.
I don't know. You're too pretty for me, Brendan.
Next conversation.
But I think your mentor's comment's right on. Like, it's something that's happening for you, not to you. And I think that reframe, like, we've done this. This is, it's actually drives a greater level of accountability and removes victimhood. If you think about it, that frame. Now, we're going to wrap this up. I want to ask you a question. We always talk about habits. I'm going to throw this out at you from left field. To new fathers, that have just had a baby, what are a couple things or one thing that you feel you've learned over your 9 weeks that either you're doing or you're going to do, or that you should do? Look at you yawning. You're tired. See? Yeah.
No.
It's for real, dude. But like, what would your advice be on a habit?
A habit. So I believe for anyone to have an opinion on something that has any weight to it, they need to have both the authority and the empathy to say it. Like, authority as in been there, done that, got the t-shirt. Here's why I think this is important. But couple that with empathy of, I get it. I've been there. I understand how it is. I have the empathy without the authority in this instance, because I'm only 9 weeks in. But one thing I can say is working for me is to know the ineffable truth that it takes a tribe to raise a kid. And I am so grateful that I took my wife. If I ever want to achieve anything, like get my way, I just have to take my wife to Thai food. It's just like the elixir to make her say yes to anything.
Move to Australia.
Yeah. I know the Thai food's so much better in Australia. So I take her to Thai and I go, babe, you know, how do you feel? You know, we don't talk about a 10-year plan. She and I never did. It was like next week, 6 months, whatever. And I was like, do you see us getting a bigger house? She goes, yes. I go, okay. Do you possibly ever see your mother living with us? And she goes, that would be a dream, but I would never expect that of you. And I said, I get that. It's kind of, there's always jokes about that. Like, you don't want to move in with your mother-in-law. Yeah, the mother-in-law. And I said to her, I said, well, I want you to know that's something that I'd be, you know, willing to entertain. Hence the 4,500 square foot home that has its own separate 2-bed, 2-bath apartment down below. Got her own deck, her own entrance, garage, everything. Because of that conversation, we now have the ability for my daughter to have the most valuable quality time she will ever have with someone other than me and Christine and subsequent siblings, children. She's going to get that with her grandma. My mother-in-law is going to get that with her granddaughter, right? Someone who's had to raise children while working 2 jobs and insane hours. Now she gets the ability in her retirement to get that quality time. I have the ability to call on my mother-in-law. Can you please take the baby? Just so I can take a shower. So the thing I would say is, it's not your sole responsibility to make sure this kid turns out as a functioning human being in society and is raised well. Lean on your family members if you are so fortunate to have them nearby or near you. Lean on your friends and family that also would love to be a part of this kid's life. You'll be amazed how many people are just waiting for you to ask them to babysit, or just waiting for you to ask them to take them for a weekend. Or
particularly because they can give the baby back.
They can, yeah, they can give them back for sure. So, I mean, that's what I would say, because Christine and I have great tools. I'm sure we could raise a great kid, but we are not everything that Bindi needs in her life. There are other role models out there. There are other people that can influence her and teach her. I mean, mate, I'm not even a Christian, and I'm entertaining with Christine us finding a church. So that there is that congregation, that community, other kids, right? She gets a chance to learn from others, other teachings, other ideas. So, mate, it takes a tribe. It takes a tribe. And if you're listening and you don't necessarily have that network or that support, find it. Yeah. Because it's there. It's how you make it. It's how you treat people. It's the relationships you garner and nurture. And I'm grateful for the tribe we have.
Yeah, no, it's a great way to close. Brandon, where could our audience learn more about you? Where can they find you, bro?
Yeah, so Brandon Clift on all socials. I don't really hang out on Twitter, not that cesspool. I'm mainly just on Instagram and Facebook. You can find me at Brandon Clift, CLIF for Foxtrot, T for Tango. And check out the Mankind podcast. You will see a little yellow thumbnail with a bunch of hands. That's our podcast thumbnail. We are just hitting 100 episodes. RJ, you were episode 98. We've had some phenomenal people join us to talk all things manhood, masculinity, taking off the masks, identifying the journey of man in the 21st century. Our mission is to break the molds of modern manhood, to prove that there is more than one way to be a man, not just the rigid ideas of manhood that we were given by our parents and they got from their parents and then their parents. So we have a lot of courageous conversations around taboo topics that you may be afraid to bring up at the workplace water cooler or around the dinner table. So we've tackled, whether successfully or not, we've tackled racism, misogyny, sexual violence, all sorts of things, to have the conversation first so you don't have to have it first. We want you to have it second, after having listened, and then know that if we can normalize these conversations, then we can actually start to do some things about them and move forward. So
yeah, I highly recommend this show. I think it's one of the greatest podcasts, conversations around male and societal issues. And I think that you guys go really deep. So I will put that in the show notes, but we are going to land this plane now. Brandon, really appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on the show, bro.
yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure, RJ. Till next time. Love these.
See you, brother.
See you, mate.